What a difference skin color makes. Alec Baldwin, do you know what's happening to him right now? The charges against him have largely been dropped. And the production of the movie Rust is going to continue as if someone didn't just pass away. What a difference does skin color make? You remember all the controversies with Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart puts out a freaking tweet years and years and years ago, and he can't host award shows. They want him to apologize for that. You remember the rapper Tyga, black dude, had to apologize for allegedly insulting the Hispanic community, but the Hispanic community on Power 107 or Power 105, I believe, in Los Angeles in California, you have hosts there who routinely insult black people, but no one's asking him to apologize. I mean, you just look at the list. I mean, Jussie Smollett, no matter how you feel about him, this man simply filed a false report. Meanwhile, Brett Favre stole money from the poorest state in this country. And what is happening to Brett Favre right now? Don't worry, I'll wait. I'll sit here and wait all day for you to tell me about the double standards. See, the thing about black people, right, is that some people seem to think that we don't like justice, that we don't like standards. It's not that at all. It's that we want to play by the exact same rules that you have set. The problem is that oftentimes when we try to play by the exact same rules, you change the rules of the game. Like, for example, you told us that we shouldn't praise predators. You look at people like Bill Cosby and R. Kelly and Deshaun Watson. Okay, cool. So then why are you praising people like Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis Presley, who were known to get along with underage girls? And in fact, you don't have to even, ask me about that. You can Google it yourself. It's well known. It's been known for quite some time. You go and you criticize African kings and African warlords, but you don't look at the founding fathers and all these presidents who start these proxy wars and drone strikes. You don't look at them the exact same way. How can you criticize the African warlord but not criticize the Western leader, the white Western leader who causes the proxy conflict and thus causes the African warlord to exist in the first place? That's like blaming the Taliban and blaming ISIS for existing when we know that the U.S. had an actual hand in that. We know that. So I want you to understand something, right? The double standards that we're seeing in society are becoming more and more pronounced as we go along. It's almost like we're going backwards. This is why I don't co-sign racial double standards. Just like I'll give you another prime example, Don Lemon. Don Lemon said something that I would strongly recommend no man say, no matter how much you believe in it, especially when a woman's present, However, you look at Chris Cuomo. I brought this up, previously. Chris Cuomo, he was covering up and trying to cover up for what his brother Andrew Cuomo was doing in New York. And the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, she got involved. And look how much had to happen to get Chris Cuomo off the air. Look at all the anchors in the past who have said things and they happen to be white and they get away with it. Look at all the years that white anchors have sat on television and demonized black people, said all kinds of things about the black community, and actually supported some of the racist politicians, and actually displayed our mugshots to support police narratives, and just went with police narratives without actually investigating deeper into some of these stories about police misconduct, police corruption, police fatally shooting people, police abusing people, police stealing money, civil forfeitures. They never looked deeply into that until you got tired. Do you understand how backwards that is for the media? The media is supposed to be an arm of defense for the people. And yet, when you look around, what you're seeing is that the media oftentimes just goes along with the mainstream government narratives and the mainstream political narratives, and the government always uses the media as its own arm. Like you can't look at Fox News going along with what Donald Trump was saying for the longest time, or even MSNBC go along with whatever Democrat president pops up, and then not see that as a clear sign that based on who's in power, that's what's going to be pushed. And what we're seeing being pushed for the most part is anti-black hatred and anti-black double standards. Double standards left and right. Another good prime example is, I want you to notice how we judge hockey games differently from basketball games when a fight happens. Like, I was walking to a Buffalo Wild Wings the other day with my wife, and I was waiting on a table, and I pointed out to my wife, hey, they're fighting in a hockey game. And I was pointing to a college basketball game. that was going on the screen directly next to the fight on the hockey game. And my wife said, well, that's just how hockey is. And I said, why do you say that? And this is not her fault. I was just using it as a teachable moment. I said, why do you say that versus the basketball? It's like, well, we don't really expect that in basketball. I said, the reason why is because the basketball players are mostly black. Notice that in sports where the blacker you get, the more you expect those people to not be violent. Even in boxing, right? When there's a brutal knockout, right? Notice how sometimes if the person knocking out the other person is a black person, notice all the language that's being used. Very dehumanizing language. Notice that. I want you to notice how people judge that fight at the Palace with the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons with Ron Artest and Ben Wallace. Notice how they judge that, right? Versus the average hockey game where something like that could happen all the time. I want you to notice how people judge the protests that were mostly peaceful in response to what happened to George Floyd versus how people are judging the riots that's happening in Philadelphia because the Eagles lost Super Bowl. Notice who's in the pictures on most of those riot pictures, white people. But when it comes to times to talk about riots, whenever there's a police officer who's a racist, I want you to notice how no one ever remembers those stories. No one remembers that. They only remember what people choose to remember. And you see, that actually goes back to the double standards. Throughout history, you will notice that black celebrities, black athletes, and black people in general are held to a completely different standard. Kyrie Irving, he can't share a tweet. He can't share a tweet. He can't tweet about anything. But meanwhile, Tom Brady is a known supporter of Donald Trump. Known supporter. Tweeted about it, talked about it. So why should Tom Brady have free speech, but Kyrie Irving doesn't? And it really shows you the muffling, the dehumanization, and the absolute vitriol that people have for black people in America and across the planet. You're going to be held to a completely different standard. White folks can go over to the African continent and dress up in dashikis and wear kufis and make a mockery of the African lineage. But the second that you get somebody like Nas, somebody like Michael B. Jordan, someone like Beyonce, you get Kendrick Lamar show up, do some filming, wear some traditional African dress. Suddenly, you're culturally appropriating. But in the second that we say, hey, we have our own lineage here. Oh, you're just black. Why you want to separate? You got to pick one. Basically, the whole gist of this video is that white people are allowed to do what we are not allowed to do as black Americans. And as black people in general across the world, across the diaspora, white people are almost daring you to do what they do. They will turn around and accuse black people of being scandalous and thieves and all this stuff. Who is more scandalous and more thieving than dominant white society? Who has colonized and stole more culture, stole more forms of music, artifacts? I mean, you got white countries returning artifacts to this very day. But they accuse us of being thieves. They accuse us of chaos. And yet it's your white countries who start proxy wars and drone strike black and brown countries. It's your countries who do that. The white society, the dominant white society, holds black celebrities and black people to a standard that they've never even come close to reaching. And this is why we cannot co-sign racial double standards. Because I just can't co-sign something when I know that you, in the dominant white society, you don't hold yourself to that standard. So on my channel and on all my channels, I will not be co-signing racial double standards. I don't care what the offense is. If you aren't holding the same energy for other white people who are guilty of said offense or whatever you are talking about a black person with, I'm going to just simply ignore it. Same with it that you do. Because the whole gist of this video is that I want to be treated the exact same way that you are treated. So if you want to ignore things, I can too. ACAB 1312.